And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me, as always, my beautiful co-host Laraib, as we are here to break down week 7 of the NFL, week 6 of the NFL football season. Excuse me. It's been a long day, and it's been a long and fun week, Laraib. I would say this was probably the most chalk of all the weeks so far in terms of just the overall results. Just kind of a boring Sunday. um, there were some, crazy, maybe like blowouts, or just startling to look at. But overall, pretty chalk for the most part. We both did well in the picks, Laura, but someone ended up winning in the picks. So we can go ahead and check those out, sir.
Yeah, finally a little return to normalcy this week. No upset of a team who was down by over 3.5. So none of us had a chance of hitting an upset. And for me, a huge Buffalo win on Monday Night Football gives the victory. But man, I got to stop kicking myself or shooting myself in the foot with these stupid picks. Picking my Seahawks when you picked them as your upset. I mean, that's just an analytical play. I need to go with the favorite team in that spot, and that it should have made it a lot easier for me instead of a Monday night sweat. But besides that, my Chargers come through against your Denver Broncos in a huge spot after a bye, and that ties us up 3-3 for the rest of this or for this part of the season.
Yeah, I like the Broncos in that one. I can't even, I'm not even too mad. It's just that offense. It's just hard to bank on this Denver offense sometimes. And I give a lot of credit to the Chargers defense. They played very well. We won't be able to get to the Chargers in this episode, but I want to give them a special shout out. But the biggest game that we ended up disagreeing on that you got right, Larab, was last night, Monday Night Football. The Bills win 23-20 and a really entertaining game. A really just fun Monday night game to watch because last week was awful with the Saints getting demolished. Um, but this was an overall just a fun game. The Bills end up winning. Um, Overall takeaway, I know we're going to get more into these teams and some of the splashy moves that we just saw today. But overall, just looking at last night's game, just from the Bills' perspective, Laura, how do you feel about where they are through 6 weeks now?
I mean, it's hard to kind of paint a picture, especially when we'll talk about the acquisition that they made. But it seems like they had a really big emphasis on running the ball to start that game, and they were dominating that Jets defense, and there was no other way to go about it. On that opening drive, I think only one pass and just all runs, and it was rookie running back Ray Davis who said, "You know what? Let me just put the team on my back real quick and empower it down the field." And so it's clear that they are moving away from the passing game more and more every single week, especially off that 9 for 30 completion rate from Josh Allen from last week. And so I guess this is like the new look Bills that we're going to start seeing more power runs and more checkdowns to his tight ends. And for the most part, it looks like missed Tyler Bass field goal and some drops in the end zone. But minus that, it looks like this could be promising for the Bills.
Yeah, and a big thing for me was just at the end of the game with a chance to ice it, you put the ball in the best player on the field's hand, Josh Allen. He goes, scrambles for a first down. And it was just, that's what you expect from this Bills team. They take care of the business when they needs to get done. But with the running game, obviously no James Cook, and Ray Davis performed admirably, as you mentioned. But especially after last week's game against the Texans, when it was like, Josh Allen's taking a lot of shots here, and it just seems like they really can't get a passing game going. So, yes, the run game was something that I was excited about this Bills team, a new identity, putting the ball less in Josh Allen, making his job easier on the outside. But, you know, with the new acquisition, it should make life easier. But just overall, I was very impressed. Defensively, though, still have a lot of concerns, Laura, because middle of the field was just getting eaten up again. A lot of guys over the middle. The quick passing game from the Jets was really working. Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, these guys just coming over the middle and getting a lot of success. And then, but for the most part, the Jets really only had one real sustained touchdown drive. For the most part, you had a Hail Mary at the end of the half, which is just throw your hands up. That's Aaron Rodgers magic right there. Even though kind of strange, you only rushed two people when these two Jets tackles were turnstiles all night long. Another thing for me was 10 or 11, excuse me, accepted penalties on the Bills, and also 12 on the Jets. Just a really ugly officiating game. but that needs to get cleaned up for the Sean McDermott team if they want to, have success moving forward. But overall, a lot of, just taking care of business against the divisional opponent on the road in a game you really needed to win, because that would have given the Jets a tiebreaker. Now, let's pivot, Laraib, to the Jets. Really shot themselves in the foot a lot in this game. For every great play, there was just another weird blunder that followed it. Obviously, 2 missed kicks, all the penalties, these tackles just getting worked all game long with not a lot of help from this offense. The new coach, new play caller, what were you expecting? I picked the Jets to win, but what was this game as close as it seemed to you? Did the Jets have a real shot?
Oh, they definitely did. Now, the reason they fired Robert Saleh was because their offense wasn't working. And we saw the same thing again tonight. Their offense was not working. Now, it doesn't fall on Saleh. I think if he's a head coach in this game, I still think the outcome is going to be the outcome because it's their offense. They had some good drives, making it inside the Bills' 30-yard line, and then it's drop pass, bad placement by Aaron Rodgers, penalty here, penalty there, and then just missing kicks. And so, I mean, still in the spot like this, they were able to move the ball. As somebody who was playing against Breece Hall in fantasy football, I saw him, take those screen passes for 20 yards, break a run to the outside. So they were getting the ball moving. But then when it got to, inside the 30, they just really, really struggled.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is this offensive line. And you're right, firing Saleh isn't going to fix the fact that Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith are just not good NFL players at this point. I mean, AJ Epinesa, Greg Rousseau were just working them all night long, all the holding penalties, all the pressure on Aaron Rodgers. It felt like when Aaron Rodgers had a quick pass all the time, they found success, like you mentioned. But whenever he had to hold the ball, whenever it was a long developing play, it was a pressure, it was a holding, it was a sack, it was an interception. It was just bad news all across the board for this Jets offense. And let's just go ahead and get into it, Laraib. The two new huge acquisitions for both these teams made today, both getting star wide receivers, most notably the Jets, getting Davante Adams. This was highly speculated once Davante Adams made it known publicly that he wanted a trade. The Jets and the Saints are two of his teams. Ultimately, he lands with the Jets. So starting with the Jets here, and obviously the Bills trade for Amari Cooper, and we'll get into that as well. But does this change your view on the Jets for the rest of the season?
I mean, not really. You just hit the nail on the head. It's the two tackles. If they needed offensive line help, like you mentioned, they weren't able to develop anything that lasted more than 2.5 seconds. And so you have Davante Adams. Sure, you can work the quick game, keep on working it. But there's going to become a time in the game where, all right, we need to start moving the ball really deep downfield. And if the offensive line's not going to hold up, it doesn't matter who they have at wide receiver 1 and 2. They're just going to be huge Aaron Rodgers. Someone's pushing on him, someone's grabbing on his arm while he's trying to make a throw, and it's just going to keep on affecting this offense negatively.
Obviously, this makes the Jets a better team. I think we can both agree with that. And it seemed like Aaron Rodgers and Mike Williams could really never be on the same page. So now you just look at this wide receiver core for Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams and Allen Lazard, two guys he has amazing chemistry with. And you saw some awesome plays by Lazard last night, who clearly, I don't think adding Davante Adams is going to mess that chemistry up, but he could never get on the same page with Mike Williams. And I would even argue if Davante Adams was in the game last night, which it's kind of weird because the trade happened today, but it seemed like Davante Adams was already in New York just waiting for this trade to come down. He was on McAfee with Rodgers earlier today, which was interesting. But overall, I think in the holistic view of this Jets team, their biggest issues are the trenches. Like you mentioned, the Bills were really getting whatever they wanted with the run game, and this isn't the only team who's run all over the Jets. Last week, Aaron Jones, before he got hurt, was running all over them, almost 90 yards in the first quarter. And we saw, obviously, week 1, the 49ers had a great game rushing the ball. Javonte Williams had one of the best games of his season so far against the Jets. So Davante Adams obviously doesn't fix that problem. And then offensively, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't have time to get the ball to Davante Adams, it doesn't mean anything. So does this make the Jets a better team? Yes. But does it change my overall outlook on their contention level? No, it doesn't, because their biggest problems have not been addressed. They increased I would not, maybe not a strength of their team, but they just strengthened a part that was, it kind of feels like he's an accessory where he can win you some games against middling teams, whereas you needed that extra push from a little bit of offensive juice. But if you can't figure out these larger overarching problems, and now, next week you're playing at Pittsburgh, is Davante Adams going to block TJ Watt? Is he going to tackle Najee Harris and Justin Fields? No. So they have a favorable schedule going ahead, barring, the Dolphins and maybe the Rams getting healthy towards the end of the season. But overall, as for the Jets, looking at the Davante Adams trade, doesn't move me that much, Laraib.
Yeah, and then let's flip it on over to the other team, the winning team from last night, the Bills, who acquire Amari Cooper from the Cleveland Browns. It kind of just looks like the Browns season. They've imploded on themselves, barring that Deshaun Watson trade. But for the Bills, I think this is a huge pickup, and it actually improves them significantly. Talk about a team that can use a big name on the outside. Keon Coleman is a young rookie, and he's shown some flashes, but he's just that. He's just a rookie. Curtis Samuel, a career, Swiss Army knife, not really that guy you can go to. And then Khalil Shakir, a nice guy who can fit into the slot, but not somebody who you expect to take over a game like Amari Cooper can. And so now, your rushing attack has been playing solid all year long. Now you bring in a huge guy like Amari Cooper. I'm feeling really good about this Bills offense now.
I am as well, Laraab. And I even mentioned in a previous episode, one of my biggest problems with the Bills, I think it was after the Ravens game, it was their lack of outside threat really hurts this overall ceiling of this offense, because just talking about like the Ravens matchup, all these teams have been moving the ball on the Ravens. It's really been those receivers that have led the way against the Ravens defense all season long, whether it be Terry McLaurin last week, whether it be the Bengals receivers from 2 weeks ago. That's really been the way to attack a team like the Ravens, and that's one of your biggest competitors in the conference. So getting a guy like Amari Cooper, who in his own right, I've been pretty disappointed with him this season. He's had a lot of untimely drops that have really hurt the Browns. But, Laraab, is there a bigger quarterback upgrade for a receiver than going from Deshaun Watson to Josh Allen? I mean, I don't know. I can't see another way a receiver can go from such a different circumstance and offensive capabilities. So maybe the change of scenery adjust to Amari Cooper, and now he's in a more prolific offense. He trusts the quarterback. He can get back to Amari Cooper form, and he's still a very talented receiver. He still wins a lot on the outside, one of the shiftier route runners in the league. He has had injury problems, hamstrings in the past that have hurt him a lot in these long seasons, but overall, this is just a huge get for this Buffalo offense, and it really does raise their ceiling as a contender for me, because unlike the Jets, this was a big need for the Bills that they then went and they strengthened by getting Amari Cooper. And before we move on to our next segment, Laraab, I want to look at this from the Raiders and the Browns perspective, because the Raiders quickly trading Davante Adams this season, clearly, I don't know what you expected. When you announced that Gardner Minshew was going to be your starting quarterback entering the year, it just seemed like Davante Adams was inevitably going to be on the move. But the packages that they were that he was going for, it seemed like a little too rich for a lot of teams. But to get a third round pick that, conditionally could potentially move up to be a second round pick, I'm not sure exactly what the conditions are on the pick, but it seems like a huge win for this Raiders team. And just to get that extra draft capital, move on from a guy at the right time, instead of being stubborn, holding on to him for what? For really nothing at this point. And also being able to get off that contract as well. They didn't have to pay any of the contract. That moves on to the Jets payroll. So a big win for the Raiders, in my opinion, Laura.
Yeah, no, exactly. Getting off that Davante Adams money is going to be huge for them, especially a team who's looking to rebuild, right? I mean, no other way to think about it. Rebuilding, looking towards the draft this year and next year. Maybe bring in a guy like Shadir, maybe bring in a guy like Carson Beck, someone who could command your offense. You have some staples still over there. Divine Diablo is a great, young linebacker, along with Max Crosby, who may or may not be playing for the Raiders.
Well, let me go ahead and say it would be a bad idea to trade Max Crosby. I don't care if you get 2 first-round picks. The odds that you're going to get someone as talented as Max and as, just a cornerstone for your franchise, a guy who is bleeding black and silver, who loves this team, I think if a team like the one of the trades that I've seen a lot after Aiden Hutchinson's unfortunate injury against the Cowboys was, the Lions need to just go all in, get Max Crosby. If I'm the Raiders, you need a guy like Max Crosby to usher in the new era, just that, stalwart in your defensive line. I think it would be a bad move to move off of him unless you're offered some godfather offer by the Lions or another team who needs an edge rusher. But that would be a bad move. But overall, Davante Adams trade, good move. And the Browns, I mean, at least they had the self-awareness to say, this isn't going to work this year. It's still puzzling to me why Deshaun Watson continues to play quarterback for this team, especially in a game. Yeah, I don't want to labor on it too much, but a game last week where a competent quarterback beats the freaking Eagles last week. And it's just Deshaun Watson can't get out of his own way. He's legitimately one of the worst starting quarterbacks of all time this season. They have some of the worst offensive numbers in Browns history. Browns history. You might as well say NFL history at that point for bad offenses. So I like the fact that the front office is saying, let's acquire draft picks. Why are we trying to build on this era? Clearly, Deshaun's not the guy, but there's pressure from ownership to remain the starter for some unknown reason. The experiment failed. Just, take your medicine and move on, Browns. At least it looks like they're moving in a positive direction.
Well, we'll see what they continue to do, Lewis. But let's go ahead and move on to rookie quarterbacks this season. They've been playing a lot better than I think a lot of people expected. We have a team with the Bears, Caleb Williams, 4 wins, Jaden Daniels, 4 wins, Bo Nix, 3 wins, Spencer Rattler goes out there and looks fantastic. Drake May goes out there, 3 touchdowns in his first start. A lot of these rookie quarterbacks came in and they proved me wrong, most definitely, in their first year. But what I want to ask you, Lewis, I want to look at some report cards. It's not the first 9 weeks of the season yet, maybe like they do in elementary school, but it is the first 6 weeks. And so I want to ask you from these guys, of course there's an expectation coming in, but I want to see your grade on that expectation to what they've been playing like now.
Well, let's go one by one, Laura, and let's start with the biggest shining star of this draft class, and that is Jaden Daniels. A+ is the grade I give Jaden for his season so far. I mean, this Commanders team going into the season, it's just so funny what a good quarterback can do for a team. It just band-aids on so many things. This offensive line seems shaky. Obviously, who was the quarterback last year? I'm blank. Sam Howell, most sacked quarterback in the NFL last year. And they had the talent on the outside, and he had decent numbers, but it was like you just couldn't provide a competent offense with all the mistakes and the turnovers, and they really didn't change much for that offensive line, except bringing in a guy like Jaden Daniels, who, with his legs, with his intelligence, his just football experience, being in college for so long, he just elevated the ceiling of this team at such a high level that they are in a great position to win their division. That really is up for the taking with the Eagles and the Cowboys floundering to start the season. So overall, JD5, there's not much to say here. Highest completion percentage in the league, over 300 rushing yards in the season, over 1,400 passing yards. A+ for me.
Yeah, no disagreement on this side. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And what surprised me the most from what he's done so far this year, Lewis, has been his arm. Really, a lot of comps coming out from the draft would be, he's a Lamar Jackson type, someone who's a little bit on the smaller size, a little more skinny, someone you expect to just be, doing that, quarterback read and rushing a lot. But his arm has been fantastic. Those deep bomb throws, you think back to Monday night a couple of weeks ago, just that shot to just put that game away. Right. 2 beautiful touchdown passes to Terry McLaurin against the Ravens this week. He's been outstanding. And I think there's no question that he is playing the best out of all the rookies so far.
Yeah. And then one thing that, like you mentioned, going through the draft process that I think Jaden Daniels was unfairly maligned going in was his football experience. Oh, he was in college for so long. There's a ceiling on how long he can be an effective quarterback for because of his athleticism. He is insanely smart. He's a super high football IQ, and he's been in so many big games, Laraib, that I just think he fit so well in the transition to the NFL that he's this effective this early on. And, even despite a loss to the Ravens last week, he looked very impressive. And I think, his ceiling is extremely high going forward for this Commanders team. But let's go ahead and move on to Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick in this draft class. Slow start to the year, a lot of questions. The past few weeks, he's been on fire, including 4 touchdowns last week in London against the Jaguars. What is your grade for Caleb Williams?
I'm gonna go solid B plus plus. I'm not gonna put him in the category yet, just because, like you mentioned, those first 2 weeks, right, against the Titans week 1. Man, oh man, I don't know how the Titans lost that game, but yeah, Caleb Williams did not look good. And then in that second game against the Texans on Sunday Night Football, just pressure in his face, errant balls here and there. And then the last one I'm really going to gripe on him for is that Colts game in Indianapolis. I know you're on the road, huge spot. And he had some bad turnovers in that one. But since then, what's really picked up? The play calling has picked up, the rushing has picked up, and the defense has stayed consistent all year long. And it's just been Caleb Williams, not shooting himself in the foot, making the correct plays when guys are open, he's hitting them. And they were playing fantastic football the last 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, given expectation going into the year, I'm giving him an A minus, Laraib, because of how it took him some time to get forward. The offensive line definitely needed some time to gel. And this wasn't an offensive line that we were saying, oh, they're one of the worst in football, but it was a new group, a lot of, faces, and a different offensive scheme, going from more of a heavy rushing attack last year with Justin Fields. But then you realize, hey, this is still a very talented rushing offensive line. They're really good at just getting guys off the ball. And that they weren't utilized like that early on. It was a lot of passing attempts, a lot on Caleb Williams' shoulders. But recently, you get DeAndre Swift more involved. He seems very comfortable in the play action game. He's getting a better connection with guys like Cole Kmet and Keenan Allen as well. Both of those guys had 2 touchdowns last week, and just overall great games. DJ Moore had a good game the week prior. So I just think he's getting a lot more comfortable with this offense, comfortable in the play action scheme. Now, he's played against some pretty porous defenses the past 2 weeks in the Panthers and the Jaguars. A lot of quarterbacks have had very good games. And now you play the Patriots you have a bye week, and then you play the Commanders. So not a crazy gauntlet of defenses, but they still have yet to play a divisional game. And this NFC North is one hell of a division to go up against. So a lot of tests still on the table for Caleb Williams and this offensive line. But so far, I think he's lived up to the potential that we forecasted before the season. But let's go on, Laraib, now to Mr. Bo Nix. Broncos are 3-3. He's had some very up and down performances so far. What is your grade for Bo?
I got him sitting at a cool C++. I'm giving him a double plus again. He's looked fantastic in some spots, and then in other spots, just been awful. They won a couple of games. The big one that comes to mind is when they went into Tampa, and he looked really awesome in that game against the Buccaneers. Then you think back, they played the Jets. He had negative yards in the first half against that team. And so it's just going to be riding that roller coaster with Bo Nix. And so I think he's sitting there at a C, and they haven't really able to establish the run. Cortland Sutton has been like his main guy. And so they're missing some, good guys on the offensive side of the ball, but it's really been that defense that stepped up for him and has been helping him a lot throughout the season. So I can still see him improving, especially if we can see him start to get more comfortable, but he's looked great rushing outside of the pocket. And, he's shown some flashes, but still, I think he has a lot to improve.
Yeah, I have him at a C, Laraib, just because he's had some historically awful performances. But at the same time, he's shown me some flashes with, let's be honest, a offense that's lacking a lot of talent, especially on the outside. Cortland Sutton is a good receiver, not a great receiver, but outside of Cortland Sutton, it's a lot of nothing for this Broncos offense. And then they really can't get a great running game going. So a lot is on his shoulders at an early part. And you've just seen some weird games where it's like last week against the Chargers, he had 22 passing yards at the half, but then he comes out and he finishes with over 200 passing yards. And you alluded to it. The thing that doesn't make it dreadful for me for Bo Nix so far is the fact that he's a lot more mobile than I anticipated. His ability to get outside the pocket, make plays on the move, and even extend plays, some scrambling opportunities for him. A long touchdown run against the Buccaneers a few weeks ago. But overall, I really have been impressed with some things that I wasn't expecting, but there's definitely a ceiling on his play. He doesn't have a super live arm. I don't trust the ability to push the ball down the field consistently. And yeah, he's in a pop gun offense with Sean Payton, who as I've seen with Sean Payton in the past with guys like Jameis Winston, he doesn't like to put a lot on their shoulders, wants to get them ready. So maybe things ramp up for him, but I just don't like the talent on this team. So I'm not sold out. I think he deserves an average grade for average play so far, but definitely some things to like going forward for Bo.
Yeah, all right, Lewis, let's move on to our next guy. I know Drake May might be the talk of the town currently, but I want to ask you about your guy. Spencer Rattler came in for his first ever start in the NFL against the Buccaneers. What grade would you give him after one game?
After one game is tough, obviously small sample here. I'm gonna go B minus for Radler. There are definitely some things and flashes I really did like. Now was kind of up against it, immediately to start the game on his first pass or his second pass, excuse me. Chris Olave gets concussed. It gets returned. He fumbles the ball, gets returned for a touchdown by the Bucks after they had already scored a touchdown. So boom, out of the gate, you're basically down 17-0. But in that moment, he led some scoring drives. I really liked what I saw. You could tell Clint Kubiak really wants a mobile quarterback because we see what Brock Purdy is able to do in San Francisco. It's that bootleg passing game, getting out in the run, finding these guys across the middle in different routes. And I thought Baker actually had some good plays in the bootleg against the Saints last week as well. But I really liked his athleticism. It seemed like he was really reading one read at a time, though, and the guys were open because of the scheme. But I think in higher level competition against better defenses, that's definitely going to be a problem for him. And this offensive line was not giving him any favors whatsoever, especially in the second half of that game. Just really getting collapsed by this Buccaneers defense and Todd Bowles, who schemed up some really good halftime adjustments. So I did see some tangible things I did like from Radler. He has just an overall intangible, just like confidence about him. Seems like the guys really like playing for him, playing with him. It was disappointing to see Olave go out early in that game because he was one of the guys who was really excited about playing with Radler. But overall, one game isn't a big sample size, and it was a game where you were just getting throttled on the defensive end of the ball. That's a different discussion. But just looking at Radler in a vacuum, he had a great start to the game, some bad interceptions to end it. So I'm going to stick with a B minus.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I also like a B minus grade. What I really liked about his play, Lewis, was his ability to get out of the pocket and then really, really hit those guys. I'm not talking about like, they're having to extend out for it or, come back to it. He was hitting them really, really good on the move, especially on that touchdown to Bub Memes. I mean, his ball placement looked fantastic, especially for his first ever start. And you mentioned it. This guy just has swag written all over him. He has
Aura.
utmost confidence. Nothing could have phased him, and a couple of bad turnovers here and there. That's what you expect from a rookie in their first ever start. But I really liked what I saw out of Spencer Rattler, someone who doesn't look like he can be shaken by any big hits or turnovers, someone who's going to go out there and looks like they're going to compete. And who knows what happens in that game if Chris Olave stays in. And so I'm really looking forward to see what he can do in these games coming up. And I think, at the end of the season, he might be a little bit higher than a B minus for me.
All right, and then the final rookie quarterback to discuss here is Drake May, as you mentioned earlier. He's his first start against the Texans, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Shaky start for the offense, but what I loved about Drake May, and maybe it's just going from Jacoby Brissett to Drake May. Maybe Drake May isn't all that, but Joe Brissett was that bad. But he just completely elevates this offense and all the talent on this offense because of his ability to push the ball down the field. That touchdown he had down the sideline, I can't remember who it was to exactly. Demario Douglas was just beautiful. And that's something we haven't seen from this Patriots offense really since Tom Brady. I mean, Mac Jones wasn't making throws like that. So overall, I really liked what I saw, just pushing the ball down the field, the confidence staying in the pocket against a really good Texans defensive front. He took some hits. He had 2 interceptions. But just from what I can, overall optimism perspective from this Patriots team is just a high ceiling guy with very good tangibles, and what he's able to do for this offense, B plus in a small sample size just because of the mistakes and the rookie things. But if he starts to get some continuity going with some of these guys on the outside, Jalen Polk, Demario Douglas, then I think he's going to have a lot of, I would say a lot of success. This offensive line and run game for the Patriots still leaves a lot to be desired. So he's definitely, getting thrown to the fire here. But if I'm a Patriots fan, I'm super excited from what I saw so far.
Yeah, he's also at around a B for me as well. In a game where you don't have your best offensive option, Ramondre Stevenson, and you rely on rookie Jalen Polk and and a couple-year vet, Demario Douglas. It's going to be a tough game for you, but he went out there and he did the best that he could with the guys that he had. He looked good, 3 touchdowns on the day against a, Texans defense, which is not any slouch. Now you are at home and, I'm sure you've had some good reps throughout the season and you get to see the mistakes from Jacoby Brissett, but still he came in and he played solid. And you mentioned it, right? Someone who can add that vertical element to your offense, which you haven't seen with Jacoby Brissett and his noodle arm. And so it brings another dynamic in. They still play in a division where they still have to play everyone else at least once more. And so we'll see where they go from there. But I really liked how he played as well.
And you know what? I also think there's an extra element of his game with his mobility that wasn't really tapped into in his first start. But that is something I'm also excited to look forward to with him going forward because, he was kind of billed as a Josh Allen light prospect. So if he's able to, make plays with his legs and, just the rushing aspect to complement a pretty porous rushing game, that could overall just increase the ceiling of this offense. So I'm very excited if I'm a Patriots fan after one game, but there is still a lot of season left to play, Laraib. And let's go ahead and move on to a Thursday night football preview. A game going into the season I was super excited for. Now I'm a little less excited for, but that is the return of Sean Payton to New Orleans. The Denver Broncos traveling to New Orleans to face the Saints. Denver is a 2.5-point road favorite in this ball game. And a big thing for me is just the injuries to the Saints. I mean, I saw something today about the week 1 starters versus the week 7 starters against the Broncos. And it's just ugly, Noah Olave is in this game after the concussion, obviously. You're still missing a lot of depth on the interior of your offensive line. Alvin Kamara seems pretty banged up at this point. And, obviously you're starting Spencer Rattler, a rookie in his second game against a formidable defense in the Broncos. So a very tough spot for this offense to be, on a short week. You just played a Monday Night Football game 2 weeks ago, then Sunday, and then Thursday. It's a lot to ask for a team that, honestly, Laraib, is spiraling right now. And obviously the offense is in a tough spot. But the thing for me is how disappointed I am in this New Orleans defense. And this should be a easy game for you with Bo Nix on the road in a primetime spot in New Orleans. Those fans are going to be drinking. They're going to be ready to boo Sean Payton out of the building, I think. I don't know what the reception is going to be for Sean. Me personally, I would cheer him because looking at what we have now is ugly. And I think the Broncos are going to win this game just because the Saints are way too banged up on both sides of the ball. Tyrann Mathieu had a forearm injury. Unlikely he's going to play in this game. And this defense, most yards per game allowed in the NFL. Obviously, last week's performance against the Buccaneers did not help that, giving up almost 700 yards of offense to this Buccaneers team. You're going to have an easier test in the Broncos, at least defensively. But just the rush defense has been awful. And we saw this, and it was week 3 against the Eagles, and I was saying, I need to see this Saints team face a real rushing offense. We just saw Saquon Barkley rush for almost 140 yards in that game, and then ever since, it's just been downhill. Tyler Algier that week, and then you go into Kansas City, and it's not really, Kareem Hunt rushes for over 100 yards, and then obviously last week, the Buccaneers have over 270 rushing yards, and you don't face a good rushing attack in the Broncos, but man, just awful tackling last week. The effort was awful. And I'm looking at this game, Laraib. I think the Broncos are going to win. And if they do, this ownership needs to take a serious look at Dennis Allen not returning for week 8 for the New Orleans Saints.
And I think this is a get-right game for your New Orleans Saints. Dennis Allen going against his old master, I guess I should say. And it's going to be on this defense in a get-right spot. Like you mentioned, you're playing against a Broncos offense, which is not formidable in any sense of the word. And so, come on, you're at home. You're still in your spot. The Dome is going to be rocking for Thursday night. I expect a lot of boos for Sean Payton, especially the way that he left. And so I think this is a huge spot for the Saints. Like I mentioned earlier, I like how Spencer Rattler played. Even without Chris Olave in this one, you feel like he can get the ball to some of those speedsters down the field, get the ball to Alvin Kamara, and this is going to be a tough fight. There's no other way about it. It's going to be a fight, and whose defense is going to let up first. And I just have a feeling that Spencer Rattler is going to get the better of this Broncos defense. Give me the Saints at home, 16-13. Late
X Factor.
groupie, late Will Lutz miss sends this game to 0-0 and the Saints win.
That would be pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. That did make me a little excited. But the X factor for me in this game is Zach Allen, defensive tackle, or I guess defensive end. He kind of plays on that three technique for the Broncos. He has been wrecking games all season long. He was an underrated guy last season, and I think against this interior of the Saints offensive line, he is going to wreck this Saints offensive attack. So definitely pay attention for him. And I think the Broncos, I think Sean Payton pulls out some BS he's been holding on to all season long for this game. And you mentioned, going up against his former, young grasshopper and Dennis Allen. He knows all his tricks. He knows this defense well. He's going to have some BS plan. And I think Bo Nix rushing yards, that might be a very interesting prop for this week. That's something I would definitely look at. But I have the Broncos winning a ugly, low-scoring 13-6 game in New Orleans. Yeah.
All right, Lewis. So that's going to wrap up our week 6 preview. We talked about the big trades that happened today, as well as the rookie quarterbacks this season. So if you agree, disagree, go ahead and let us know down below in the comments. And then we have our week 7 preview coming up on Thursday for you guys. Yeah, a lot of great games to look forward to this week. Hopefully it won't all be chalk. But until Thursday, I think this is the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.